eyes glowing, and he said, he was speaking to everyone, but he was staring at me. First, you learn the Chumash, Tanakh. Then you learn Mishnayos. Then you learn Gemara. Then you learn Kabbalah. He gave it very deep into me, the way he said it to me. And I say it to you the same way. First, Tanakh. Then Mishnah. Then Gemara. Then Kabbalah. And so I took that home with me. And I thought about it many days. And I thought, he's right. We know from Chazal he's right. But you know, it's not an easy thing to just stop all your spiritual learning. But instead I took that koach, that strength of what I had wanted to put into the Kabbalah learning, and I reinforced it down to where it needed to be. And I started learning all the Tanakh. It was amazing to me. I felt so uplifted from it. I thought I could never relate to something down to earth like the whole Tanakh. So I went through all the Shoftim, I went through all the prophets, went through everything, Chumash, everything from start to finish, and I learned it. And then afterwards, I remembered, he said, now you learn Mishnah. So I started with Mishnah Brachos, and I went parak by parak by parak, and I soon discovered that if I take all this energy that I have to learn Kabbalah, which is a tremendous energy a person has, a fire to learn this thing, this higher thing, if I take that energy and I put it to Mishnayos, I could learn the Mishnayos very, very well. And so I made certain requirements to myself. I said, I have to finish one parak every day. And then, as I had prolonged it a month or two, I said, you know what, now it's 2 paraks, 3 paraks. I did the math. I think it's if you do 2 paraks a day, you finish it in an entire year. Next thing you know, I'm doing 4 paraks a day, 5, 6. By the end of the book, I'm doing 7 in the same amount of time, that allotted time, as I had done in the beginning with 1. Because you have to take that energy you have to learn that which you're not necessarily ready for and put it to what you need to learn, and therefore you can accomplish twice as much. And then when I finished that, well, I started learning Gemara a little bit. And then I took a shortcut, started learning Yaakov, because in Yaakov is the stories of the Gemara. And then I started learning the Mishnah Berurah, and then I was back into learning my more Kabbalistic things, with more of a grounding and background in which to enter it, where I wouldn't make my own self-judgments and mistakes. And the same thing I advise you, take these energies you have to learn down higher spiritual things and put it down to earth, so give yourself a basis. This is what Chazal taught us in Pirkei Avos. And I'm going to tell you over stories from other tzaddikim who had said that the order of learning is extremely important to bettering oneself. And there's another thing it says, it's mentioned in the Sefer Kabbalah, I believe from Reb Chaim Vital, that there is one exception why a person can learn the deep secrets of the Kabbalah before they're 40. Our sages tell us 40 years old is the time when a person can learn the Kabbalah. But why can a person do it beforehand? Well, first, it depends on each individual. Well, there's one requirement that a person can maybe make the exception, though even still they really should be learning everything beforehand, and I advise you to do such. And take that energy and put it down where it needs to be. But what's that exception? And that is that a person does not question what they learn. It's one thing when you're learning the Gemara, when you're learning the Tanakh, to wonder what's the deep secrets behind this. Maybe it means something else. And you can explore all you want within reason, not to change the real meaning, but you can explore a little in these other areas. But when it comes to Sefer Kabbalah, you don't go around playing games. You don't go around saying, I don't believe that. It doesn't make sense that when Rabbi Shimon and the boys were walking through the forest, the trees started blowing and they saw angels. I don't really believe that part. I think it means something totally different, and come to your own interpretations. You don't do that with Kabbalah. Kabbalah is fact. Each person has their own experience, spiritual experience. But many tzaddikim, many big rebbes would go to, like Rabbi Nachman, and he would say, I see the holy malach, you can't say the name, the starts with a mem, the big malach. I see him like this. And the Rebbe would say, no, you don't see him like that, you see him like this. So when it comes to Kabbalah, it's like this. Even though each person has their own vision, and as the Ramchal teaches in his Sifrei Kabbalah, that's okay. It's a good thing. It's a part of it. But there's still, when you learn Sifrei Kabbalah, you don't play around, you don't mess around, and do your own thing with it. It's a very straightforward basis of understanding the different spheros, and you don't question it. And a lot of people don't realize how much they question things and misinterpret, and that their learning style is just not adequate at this time for them to learn Sifrei Kabbalah. Different opinions as to when a person can learn different svarim. So it says in the Midrash, just as the bride is adorned with 24 ornaments, the scholar must be diligent in the 24 books of Scripture. Sefer Hasidim, educate the youth according to his way. Even when he grows old, he will not deviate from it. If he excels in Scripture but not in Talmud, don't pressure him to study Talmud. If he understands Talmud, don't pressure him to study Scripture. Primarily educate him in what he knows. If a person sees that his son is incapable of Talmud, he should teach him halachos, gedolas, midrashim, kriya. Yitzchak Abarbanel says the ages mentioned in the Mishnah regarding learning are the starting times, not finishing times. For surely one should not occupy himself with biblical learnings only until he turns 5, as the Ashkenazim do today. Rather, when he reaches age 5, instruction in Scripture should begin, and when he turns 10, he's ready for the Mishnah. The Maharal says, Rishonim, Tanoim, Amroim, Geoim, and Acharonim are all learned in the set order. First Scripture, then Mishnah, then Talmud. But in this generation, they begin with the Talmud. They educate youngsters in Talmud at age 6 or 7, and only at the end do they advance them to Mishnah, not to study it, but only to seek out specific halachos. Now, one has nothing left, no Talmud, no rule, no decisions, unless he searches for them. There's mistakes in learning. The schools are not teaching the children to finish the entire orders. They're taking shortcuts. They're starting them in Talmud before they're ready. They have to try to make a plan as much as possible to fulfill this order. And many of the most religious schools are not doing this. They're failing in this, in the order. The children are not really ready to go on. Earlier generations set time limits on educating the youth according to the way at age 5, Scripture 10, Mishnah at 15, Talmud adjusting the burden to what he could bear. For the youth will accept that which he can bear. And when he completes his study of the Mishnah, the great foundation and pillar of the entire Torah, and approaches the sacred study of the Talmud, he will be able to build a tower reaching to heaven and not pebble in it to fall. All this is possible because of the existing firm basis, the Mishnah. And afterwards, if he must fight the battle of Torah, then his hands will be well prepared, laden with the armaments of Torah, which serve him as arrows in the hand of the warrior, striking their mark without fail, and these will forsake him, neither when he lies down nor when he rises. It is incumbent on the shepherds who guide the flock not to pressure or exhaust them with deceptive shortcuts, which they are really the long route. Not because of it is lengthy, but because they will die before they reach the realm of Torah. It goes on, the opinions, and it's a terrible mistake. Like I'm saying, the schools, a person has to educate their child at home more. Finish the Mishnayos with them. Educate them to learn the Tanakh well, to learn these things good, and then to learn the Gemara. And the schools today that do Kiruv, they take them right in off the street. They figure they're so brilliant minds that they're in college and all these and secular schools. They have to give them the Gemara. So the first day they're already learning Gemara, and then the child goes on throughout his life. This teenager, this 20-year-old, 30 years old. Next thing you know, he's never even learned Tanakh. You know how many people you question, they don't know who Elisha is. Learned scholars, they don't know who Elisha is. The learned people, they don't know who Elisha is. Elisha was the student